Welcome back into Wiregrass Daily News Sports, and join me on the phone right now to preview the Alabama side of the Iron Bowl is AJ Spurr. He is the site editor over at Roll Tide Wire. And AJ, I appreciate you taking out time and coming on the show today.
As always, thanks for having me on. And it's only right to have the home team on first there, and then bring in the Tide to close out the Iron Bowl coverage. But as always, thank you so much for having me.
I'm sure anybody that listens to this is already going to automatically think I'm showing any kind of favoritism. It's just like if I'd had you on first and then Taylor second, and say, "Oh, you're favoring Alabama." You know how this rivalry works, so it's probably one of them things you can't win for anything on that. But yeah, it's always great talking to you. I always enjoy our chats about Alabama.
Oh, absolutely. And look, that's the nature of the beast when it comes to the rich history of the Iron Bowl. It runs deep and it goes beyond the football field. So with you covering it now and having both Alabama and Auburn reporters to talk about it, you are now ingrained in, part of that rivalry. So it's part of the problem, part of the rivalry.
Absolutely. So we're not going to spend too much time on Alabama's game from Saturday against Chattanooga, where they won 66-10. But just for you, anything that really stood out to you about the game?
Well, as silly as this may sound, considering how deep we are into the season and how realistically there's a chance Alabama has only 3 more games left, the thing that stood out to me about Alabama the most against, FCS opponent Chattanooga was how deep this team really is. At the beginning of the season, rightfully so, a lot of people felt like the starters on this Alabama team might not be worthy of starting for this team and likely wouldn't be starters for contenders elsewhere, which is not what Alabama fans are used to. They're used to having a team 2-3 players deep on the depth chart at every single position that could start elsewhere in the SEC or other Power 5 programs. As the season's gone on, we've seen mostly the offense develop. Tommy Rees as a play caller has matured. We see Jalen Milroe getting a lot more confident. But what we haven't seen, which we have seen in years past, are the second string guys, the third string guys, the players that usually come in late in the game, close things out when there really is no risk of giving up a massive lead, because that's just what Alabama has been over the past few years. This season, it's been a little bit different because with an early season loss and a couple of close games late, Alabama and Nick Saban have really had to keep starters in for a full 4 quarters, whereas in this game, we got to see a lot of Ty Simpson. We got to see a lot of, running backs. Justice Haynes had 5 carries, 42 yards, 2 touchdowns. These are players that I think Alabama fans should be excited about in the near future, but it's also good to know that they're available now if need be, and that the game won't go, all the way down south if the absolute worst were to happen, which you never hope actually occurs, but it's football. We just saw what happened with Jordan Travis 2 days ago. Things happen. Freak accidents happen constantly. So my biggest takeaway from this was Alabama is deep, and Alabama seems primed not just at the guys on top of the depth chart, but below the depth chart. They're willing and able to come in to perform and do what they have to do if called upon.
Yeah, and I want to mention one of the players that I think I was interested in, and I saw Kool-Aid McKinstry was pulled from the punt return, and then you put in Caleb Downs, had the 85-yard punt return touchdown. Obviously, and this is a great player, young player, a 4th in the SEC in tackles with 90. Just kind of your thoughts, maybe featuring him more in that punt return role versus what they've been doing with Kool-Aid.
Look, Kool-Aid McKinstry is one of those electric players that you never know what's going to happen when you put the ball in his hand. And on defense, you don't really get to see that all too often. So having him on punt returns, I think is or was maybe at this point something that fans really liked to see. But if you're Nick Saban, you're not out there trying to put on a spectacle for fans. You're not trying to entertain people. You're out there trying to win football games. And compared to what we saw from Caleb Downs, he might be the more sure-handed returner. And you're not going to have one set guy out there every single time, although that would be ideal. Sometimes you're going to have to switch it up. If somebody's, having an off day, they're not fielding the ball well, it is what it is. That could be what's been happening with Kool-Aid, just maybe a couple off days in terms of returning kicks and punts. But from what we saw from Caleb Downs, he's electric, when he's on the field on defense and on special teams. You got to ride the hot hand, and especially going into a game like this and Georgia coming up in the SEC championship, he might be someone to keep an eye on as the go-to guy now for returns.
And you mentioned it. Let's jump into the Iron Bowl. And, just going in, and I asked you on last week, and then I messaged Taylor as well to come on the show to talk about the Auburn side of things. I saw this as a situation where, okay, Auburn's playing New Mexico State. They should be coming 7-4, 4 straight wins, a lot of energy, a lot of momentum. It's in Jordan-Hare. We know how that place is. Auburn's won a lot of games in that stadium. Maybe they had no business winning. And I want to get somebody from the Alabama side perspective on this. Now, Auburn coming into this game after losing to New Mexico State. How do you see that loss for Auburn on the Alabama side of things?
Look, if you're an Alabama fan and you're looking at this loss that Auburn just had, an embarrassing blowout loss, not to rub it in or anything, but it can't mean much. This is a rivalry game on the road at Jordan-Hare, which if you're an Alabama fan, anything can happen. I saw a bunch of tweets that were absolutely hilarious saying Auburn just got blown out by New Mexico State. Now they're going to go out there and play like the 1972 Dolphins for the first half of the Iron Bowl. And really, it's true. You have a coach that knows what it takes to beat Nick Saban because he had done so years before in consecutive seasons while he was at Ole Miss. You have a team that is talented, though hasn't been able to string together solid outings here late in the season. And overall, you cannot underestimate the impact this game has with it being in Auburn. All right, the fans play a massive role. People talk about Jordan-Hare being one of the most daunting environments in all of college football. So when you look at what happened against New Mexico State, you can nitpick and you can dig into stats and you can say, well, here's what New Mexico State did that, made Auburn tick. This is, what they didn't see coming. This is what they prepared for versus what New Mexico State actually did. And you can get into the X's and O's, and I think that that's great. But in my opinion, most of that goes out the window when you're looking at a huge rivalry game like this. And I think the same goes not just for the Iron Bowl. You look at the game, the Red River rivalry. Some of these games where there's such a rich history and just a strong distaste for, the other team, nothing matters. They might as well be 0-0, both teams. This could be the first game of the season because Auburn right now knows that Alabama is playing to advance their interests as it relates to the college football playoff. And Auburn right now, this is their season. Sure, they're going to get a bowl game, but their season will be made regardless if they beat Alabama. So while, the Tigers are trying to play spoiler here, it's Nick Saban and the Tide that has to come in, remain focused, and play Auburn as if this is, part one of the SEC championship. Every game since Texas basically has been a playoff game. So this, even more so than all those preceding, Alabama has to show up, ignore what just happened against New Mexico State. You mentioned rat poison earlier. You don't want this to turn into rat poison for Alabama, walking into Jordan-Hare thinking they've got this in the bag, because that's exactly what Auburn wants. And I know that Auburn didn't do this on purpose, for the sake of having Alabama walk in unsuspecting of a angry 6-5 Auburn team. But, it's on Alabama to stay focused. And at the same time, it's on Auburn to regroup after such a devastating loss and try to spoil what's left of Alabama's season as the postseason nears.
And just look at the matchups. X's and O's, offense versus defense. I think, and obviously as someone that watches every Auburn game, I think defensively before New Mexico State, that's been a strength of this team this year. LSU lit them up, but look, LSU's done that to everybody, so I don't even think you can even knock that against Auburn or any team that's played LSU, knowing what they've done against every team they have faced this year. But Auburn's defense, especially their starting 11, I think they have a solid starting 11 team. The depth is an issue with that team. Usually about the middle of the third quarter when the play number gets high, they kind of start to wear down. But when you look at Alabama's offense versus the Auburn defense, what do you see with that matchup, particularly on Alabama's side of things?
Well, look, it's going to come down to Jalen Milroe, and I really want to see this passing game come alive against Auburn. We've seen in the past, even looking to the past few years, going back to Mac Jones in what was that, 2019. All right, he threw 2 pick sixes. Bryce Young 2 years ago in that 4 OT game, he didn't look great in that one. Auburn's defense really stepped up. Jalen Milroe here is fighting a stigma that Alabama quarterbacks really don't perform well on the road in the Iron Bowl. So with the wide receiving unit that he has this year, which is really highlighted by Jermaine Burton, which Alabama fans have grown to absolutely love. However, he doesn't have that flashy star quality that the rest of the nation has now affiliated with Alabama. So as Alabama's offensive line continues to improve, which is silly to say in the final game of the regular season, the running game improves with it. However, in this one, I would really like to see Jalen Milroe open up as a passer, have Tommy Rees really show what Jalen Milroe is capable of before heading into this SEC championship game, which I don't try to say as rat poison to have this team looking ahead to, but as the season rounds up, you need to know what Jalen Milroe can and cannot do, especially in an environment like Auburn with the wide receivers that he does have and sometimes the very limited time that he has in the pocket. We've seen Jalen Milroe become a lot more confident as a pocket passer. So in this one, in the Iron Bowl against Auburn, I'm really, really looking at Jalen Milroe here to step up and try his best to torch this Auburn secondary.
When you look at the Auburn secondary, I know coming into the year, that was actually one of the probably most experienced part of this defense. Jalen Simpson is tied for second in the SEC with 4 interceptions. DJ James has played well. I mean, they got some good players on that side. So that really could be like a huge chess match between the two, the Auburn secondary versus those Alabama wide receivers.
Big time. And we haven't, I alluded to this a second ago with Jermaine Burton being, the go-to number one guy. One of the things we did see against Chattanooga for Alabama were some of these receivers that maybe haven't gotten as much action in earlier games. It kind of seems like in every single game, Jalen Milroe has that one target that he likes to go to. And then beyond that, it's few and far between as to if you can pick a, wide receiver 2 on the offense any given week. So against Chattanooga, sure, we saw Jermaine Burton have 3 receptions for over 100 yards and a touchdown, but we saw him spread the ball out a ton. We saw Kendrick Law with 32 yards, Jalen Hale 29, Nye Black with 24, Bond 23, and Malik Benson with 23. All right, that, if you're an Alabama fan, that is perfect. That's what you want to see. With this Auburn secondary, you can't let them, it's a meme, but you don't want to let them know your next move. You don't want them to know, okay, if Jermaine Burton's unavailable, who's the next guy that Jalen Milroe looks to? And what we saw last week was Milroe really is comfortable moving the ball around, spreading it out. And against Auburn, this is going to be key. Because if you're going to look to attack through the air, that passing game's got to be loaded up. And if Jermaine Burton is who Auburn secondary focuses on, who's that next guy up? Or who are the next few guys up? And, that's really what I would like to see coming into this game.
And flipping around, the Auburn offense versus Alabama's defense. Of course, Auburn has played better offensively since they went with one quarterback in Peyton Thorne, and Jarquez Hunter before the New Mexico State game was really playing really well. He's been playing the best he had all year. Auburn's got question receivers. They don't have the greatest receiving core in the SEC. Everybody knows that. Peyton Thorne is dangerous in the quarterback run game, but when you look at the Alabama defense going against the Auburn offense, what are you seeing there?
You just alluded to it. It's got to be making sure Peyton Thorne doesn't flush out of that pocket and do damage with his legs. Look, we talk about Caleb Downs, Kool-Aid McKinstry. We didn't mention Malachi Moore. This Alabama secondary is great. All right. I don't know if I would call it an elite secondary. Maybe in the SEC it is nationally. I'm not sure where it would rank. But the secondary is not a matter of concern for Alabama. The issue is up front and containing the quarterback. And Peyton Thorne having the ability, maybe not as much as somebody like Jaden Daniels, but having that ability to run away from any sort of pressure that he feels if he needs to is a huge consideration for Alabama coming into this game, because now you're not just focused on the run game, the passing game, moving back and forth. Now you might have to have a spy on Peyton Thorne, which detracts from, stopping the run, which takes away from, a linebacker possibly dropping back in coverage if they need him to. So if I'm Kevin Steele, my number one priority right now is making sure Peyton Thorne doesn't do what Alabama really hasn't been able to do much all season, and that's stop the quarterback from leaving the pocket and getting positive yardage.
Yeah, you mentioned Kevin Steele. That's another storyline with this game. He used to he's bounced back and forth between these two teams, which he did a great job when he was defensive coordinator at Auburn. I'll be honest with you. I'm not the biggest fan of Kevin Steele because I do think there was some kind of like backdoor politicking to get rid of Gus, and he wanted to become the head coach when Brian Harsin was the head coach. Everybody, I think a lot of people probably listening to this knows about that AL.com article that came out a few years ago about that, but we're not here to talk about that. I just been saying though, the storyline with Kevin Steele was at Alabama, went to Auburn, back at Alabama. That's kind of another interesting subplot of this game on Saturday.
That's just, look, we talked about it earlier. This is one of those things. This rivalry runs deep. It's not just the players on the field at that time. It's players of years past. It's generations of fans. It's coaches that have flip-flopped. It's great to see, and this is why, myself included, many people feel like college football is the greatest sport. It's games like the Iron Bowl and everything about it that makes it great that puts college football ahead of every other sport in so many people's minds.
Yeah, you don't get this on the NFL on Sundays, these rivalry games. I mean, you just don't get this. It's just not there. So close it up. We've broke down the matchups, offense, defense on both sides. How do you see Saturday going?
Well, look, I mentioned the memes about Auburn coming out like the 72 Dolphins or the 85 Bears. I do think Auburn comes out swinging. I think Auburn puts up some points. I think they'll be able to put up somewhere around 24 would be my guess for Auburn. However, for Alabama, I'm going to go ahead and say, oh gosh, give me 38 for Alabama, 24 Auburn. So 2-touchdown game.
I think a lot of people are going to see it that way, which everybody, I'm not giving my pick until me and Matt Lowe do our thing later on in the week, so I can hold off on that. But I could, that's kind of probably, I think, going to be a consensus for a lot of people with this game. So it's going to be fun. It's always, Iron Bowl week is always fun after we done had our fill of turkey and dressing and all that good stuff on Thursday and on Friday too, the leftovers. Then we get ready for the Iron Bowl on Saturday. But AJ, it's been fun having you on, talk about the Alabama side of the rivalry of the game for Saturday. If the listeners and viewers want to check out online, where can they find you, and where can they find Roll Tide Wire?
Well, if hearing any more of me at Spurr FM, that's SPURR FM, like the radio dial, and then Roll Tide Wire is rolltidewire.usatoday.com. And we're covering all things Crimson Tide football as the postseason comes up. And with basketball underway, we are also covering Tide Hoops.
All right, everybody, go check out AJ and go check out Roll Tide Wire. And AJ, will have to have you on also to talk some hoops down the road with that going full force with football season winding down. But I always appreciate you coming on the show, and I look forward to doing some against the time down the road.
Sounds good, brother. Thank you so much. As always, I appreciate it.
All right, and that's going to do it for our Iron Bowl preview here on Wiregrass Daily News Sports. Thanks again to Taylor Jones and AJ Spurr, both from USA Today. Of course, Taylor Jones with the Auburn Wire and AJ Spurr, as you just heard, with the Roll Tide Wire. Appreciate them coming on the show and previewing both sides of the greatest rivalry in college sports. And that's going to do it for today's show. We will be back Wednesday evening. We'll be dropping a brand new episode. You're not going to wait till Friday, obviously not Thursday, Thanksgiving. Me and Matt Lowe will preview rivalry weekend and give all our picks for the Thanksgiving weekend. So it's going to be a lot of fun, a little prime time podcasting there between me and Matt. That will come your way Wednesday evening. You can follow me on social media at PJordanSEC. The podcast is available over at wiregrassdailynews.com or wherever you get your podcast. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please follow, rate, and review. Leave a review, and I will read it on a future edition of the show. And if you leave just 4 stars, you are just a straight-up hater. You can email me at sports.phillipjordan@gmail.com and read all my written work over at Last Word on college football. Everybody has a great Tuesday. Talk to you Wednesday evening when me and Matt Lowe preview the last week of the regular season of college football. Till next time, bye-bye.